Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. So, as I've shared with you guys, the three suspicious, seemingly fake Democratic candidates in Florida all appear to be part of the same voting scheme, the same siphoning scheme to undermine the real Democrat in the race and to basically hand the win to the Republican in the race. But up until now, Republican lawmaker Frank Artiles had only really been directly tied to the campaign for his friend Alex Rodriguez, which is why they were both arrested and charged. I think it was a couple months ago now. But now we know for certain that Artiles is also tied to another one of the three candidates, 81-year-old Celso Alfonso. And you guys may recall me talking about Alfonso in the past on various shows. Like Rodriguez and Justine Iannotti, Alfonso was a registered Republican. He switched his party affiliation to no party preference right before filing to run as a no party candidate in Florida's 39th district. And like Rodriguez and Iannotti, Alfonso also did zero campaigning. His nearly identical mailers were also paid for and sent out by the same dark money groups. And he refused to speak with the press during his so-called campaign. He also claimed to have loaned himself $2,000 to open his campaign bank account. Same as Rodriguez, same exact MO. Well, Rodriguez has now told investigators that Artiles is the one who gave him that $2,000 for his account, for his bank account. And Alfonso recently admitted to the Miami Herald that Artiles recruited him to run. Apparently, they were both at the barbershop one day, and Artiles approached him and asked him to run in that race. And now, based on these newly unsealed documents, we know that investigators have interviewed Alfonso's wife. So she was listed as his treasurer for his campaign, or so-called campaign. So they've actually interviewed her, and who knows where this is going to lead. So far, though, there's no word as to whether or not Alfonso officially has become part of this criminal probe. Or if they're just at the beginning phases with him, or what the deal is. But a few other details just came to light regarding Artiles' contract. With this Pat Bainter guy, you may remember from the other day that I mentioned Bainter and his company Data Targeting. Well, I shared that Bainter's company reimbursed Artiles for expenses. And now we have some details about those expenses. And they appear to coincide with Artiles' last-minute trip down to Tallahassee, where he turned in the campaign filings for both Rodriguez and Alfonso. As you may recall, he helped Rodriguez to fill out his paperwork. And then, according to the prosecutors, he jumped on a plane and flew them down to Tallahassee and turned them in himself. So here's what we now know. Around the mid part of July of last year, 2020, Artiles submitted an invoice via email to Data Targeting Inc. And he was seeking reimbursement for expenses. So in the email from Artiles, he wrote to Bainter, quote, "Pat, as per our conversation, attached are the receipts for flight and the parking. I did not submit reimbursement for food and lodging for the 24 hours. So some key points there, right? One being, this is like right around the time that he signed that contract with Bainter and his company. It's also, him saying, 24 hours for the 24 hours that I was there. So keep that in mind, because the invoice included 5 charges that totaled nearly $5,000. And included in those 5 charges were 2 American airline charges dated June 11th. So the very same day that Artiles allegedly jumped on an airplane, rushed down to the airport, jumped on an airplane, and flew to Tallahassee to submit the 2 campaign filings, that was when he had these flights. There was also a parking fee for Miami International Airport, which is the only airport apparently that flies nonstop from Miami down to Tallahassee. And that's where he left from. Well, that charge was dated June 12th. So the day after, he flew down and submitted this paperwork. So far, they're not saying, oh, Boehnter told him to do this. There's no evidence, at least what they've released so far, saying that this was Boehnter's idea and he specifically told him to recruit these people or pay them to run as fake candidates. But, the timing works out. So we'll see where this leads. But another juicy detail also ties back to Boehnter's company and to Artiles. So on June 16th, Boehnter's chief financial officer wired $100,000 to a nonprofit called Florida Stronger. The Orlando Sentinel said that there's no indication about what that $100,000 payment was for, but Artiles was included in the email chain regarding this $100,000 payment. So it clearly had something to do with him, or he needed to know about it for some reason. They also say that they located a Miami-based nonprofit called Florida Stronger, Inc., and one of the officers of that nonprofit is the same attorney who notarized the election forms for candidate Alex Rodriguez, or so-called alleged fake candidate Alex Rodriguez. And that attorney's name is Alejandro de Verona. Another officer of that nonprofit is a man named Jose Riesco. Riesco was listed as the treasurer for Rodriguez's so-called campaign. So they all seem to be related, and for some reason, they're paying them $100,000. Now, Florida Stronger is also tied to Republican State Senator Jason Brodeur. Brodeur donated $25,000 to Florida Stronger in 2018, and they say that accounted for over 10% of the total amount of money that they raised in the entire year. So he gave them, in that donation, more than 10% of their yearly intake. And if Brodeur's name sounds familiar, it's because I've mentioned him before on the show. He ran in Florida's 9th district last year, in the same race where Justine Iannotti was listed as a no party preference candidate, and she was sending out mailers which would appeal to progressive Democrats. She was espousing, or these mailers, which were identical to Rodriguez, which were identical to Celso Alfonso, which were paid by this dark money group. Those mailers would appeal to a Democrat. And Justine Iannotti, you may recall, she, like I said, she's this third alleged fake candidate. She's also the woman who I've mentioned before who picked up and just out of the blue moved from Florida to Sweden shortly after Artiles' arrest. Or it may have been after they started investigating him. I'd have to check on the timing of that. But it was at the beginning of this year after this whole thing started to bubble to the surface. So we'll see where this all leads, but it really seems like this investigation is very broad. It involves a lot of potential Republican players. So I'll keep you guys posted on that issue. But here's another piece of news that came out just today. And this doesn't involve the unsealing of these documents, but it does involve this case. In addition to the criminal case against Alex Rodriguez and Frank Artiles, Rodriguez is also facing financial penalties imposed by the Florida Ethics Commission. That commission just rejected a proposed $6,500 fine against Rodriguez. And they're opting instead to pursue a much stiffer penalty. In fact, the panel voted unanimously in favor of rejecting that $6,500 fine. In regard to the money that Artiles allegedly paid to Rodriguez, Ethics Commissioner Jim Walden said, quote, "I find this to be the most egregious thing we've had since I've been on the commission. This was a flat out bribe." So they're not happy about this. And it seems like they're trying to make an example of Rodriguez, because everyone who's been interviewed about this or who knows about these kinds of things say that they typically just kind of let things go. They'll impose a small slap on the wrist kind of fine, and then they let people just move on. But they really are trying to take a hard line with this. And here's the thing. There is zero doubt that Rodriguez swung this election and that he handed it to Trump-loving Ileana Garcia, because he received 6,000 votes from people who lean Democratic. He received 6,000 votes from people who would have, if he were not in the race, would have cast their vote for the incumbent who had the same last name as him. There's also some question as to whether some of them just got them confused and actually voted for the wrong person. But he received 6,000 votes, and she won by only 32 votes. Not 3,200, 32. So if he had not been in the race, it is almost guaranteed that the Democrat would have won, the real Democrat, not the person pretending to be of a Democratic leaning stance. And if Ileana Garcia had any morals or ethics whatsoever, she'd resign. She would resign because she didn't legitimately win this race. But, her support for Trump tells us everything we need to know about her morals and her ethics. So there you go. But I digress. So it's back to the drawing board with this whole Rodriguez thing as far as his fines go. He apparently has the opportunity to either try to negotiate a larger fine with the commission. That's one of his options, or he can request an evidentiary hearing on the matter and then see where that leads. And according to a local news outlet, based on the 2 allegations levied against him, the maximum penalty, the maximum fine that this commission can impose upon him is $20,000. So that's as far as they can go, which is a good chunk of change. I mean, the guy was financially in trouble. All total, he received, I think it was over $45,000 from Artiles. More than likely that money is already gone, because a lot of it, remember, he didn't receive in cash. A lot of it, Artiles paid directly to his children's school. He paid their tuition. So likely he doesn't even have that $20,000, or maybe even the $6,500, I don't know, in his bank account. I don't know his finances, but based on what I've read, based on other people's dealings with him, it doesn't sound like he was swimming in cash. And remember, he's now paying attorney's fees too. So I'll let you guys know as soon as I hear anything on all of this. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. Take care. I'll talk with you soon.